Everyone loves to bring up the good old days of their favorite MMO, and Final Fantasy XI is no exception. But what were those days? In this video, I'll be getting into why that question isn't always easy to answer, and stick around to the end for what I consider to be the purest Final Fantasy XI experience that I remember. If you're new here, this is Sun for Games, sharing my tips and passions for classics like Final Fantasy XI, as well as jumping into new games that bring back some of that delicious multiplayer goodness. If you're into any of that kind of stuff, consider subscribing. And as always, if you've been here before, welcome back. But let's hop into this discussion about what classic truly means for Final Fantasy XI. As many of you know, if you've seen my latest videos or streams, I've been dabbling in some of the Final Fantasy XI private servers to try and understand the experience and see whether or not it's something that really truly still appeals to me the way that I remember it, those rose-colored glasses memories of playing Final Fantasy XI for hours on end, and see if that really truly feels the same way that it used to. Each of these has taken a different approach to what experience they're trying to provide. And I'll take liberties in one way or another from the true Final Fantasy XI experience that Square Enix delivered back in the mid-2000s. But if this experience has taught me anything, it's that no one can seem to agree on what were the glory days of Final Fantasy XI. I initially thought going into this that this was a pretty easy answer, and it's not. People have very different opinions on what the start and end point of the perfect Final Fantasy XI period truly was. I mean, there's been a lot of shifts. There was the pre-level cap raise from 50 back before the US launch. There were updates like despawning enemies when a player died or zoned, zone trains in the jungles and every other area ever. I mean, there were huge shifts. Even smaller stuff though, like the ranger nerf when you had to be far away and you couldn't just beat on things up front. These small enmity changes to ninja. I mean, millions of tiny updates like that. The early US launch had the penethrust spam with how TP worked very differently for multi-hit skills, weapon skills. I mean, that kind of stuff changed how people played and enjoyed the game. And whether or not that totally shifted your experience from like, yes, the game was amazing and then it sucked, is up to what you were playing and whether or not you thought that it affected you. But there were tons of shifts like that. And then there were bigger changes, like the release of Chains of Prometheus, which changed what endgame parties were available, what endgame content was available. There was shifts even within that expansion from like the level of difficulty. Very early on, a lot of the mob placements and everything within the Promi zones were changed, allowing players to actually make it through those zones maybe without an alliance and stuff like that. A lot of people quit very early on because they're like, this is ridiculous. This is way too hard. I'm not even enjoying the game. And people just stopped playing. Later, there were changes to some of the more difficult fights later on to make them more approachable. Still incredibly difficult, but all those kind of like subtle changes changed how you may have experienced Final Fantasy XI and its content. Undergone came out and totally changed endgame leveling forever and basically ruined, in my opinion, the whole magic burst skill chain system. Nobody wanted to do it anymore. Everybody just wanted to merit burn all the time. And I loved Undergone. It was a lot of fun, but it totally changed how people partied. And the mindset was just forever reversed about whether or not you should even focus on magic bursting, which used to be the main goal all the time. The level sync update, which apparently it wasn't until like 2008, but that made capped fights and playing with friends that were different levels like way easier. The introduction of adventuring fellows. I mean, it wasn't a game changer, but it did allow things that weren't previously capable for the average player to do solo. They could kind of like make by. They could get by with their adventuring fellow maybe, or the chocobo raising, where you could summon a chocobo from anywhere in the world. There was a time when if you were out in the wild, you were just kind of stuck. And then way later on there, you know, I think it was even post Wings of the Goddess, they introduced those books where you could get little bonus refresh and HP regen. I mean like one MP a tick refresh, but it was still refreshed just like out in the wild. And you had these like XP goals where you'd hunt 5 or 10 monsters and get a little boost of experience points, allowing for solo or low manning of jobs that weren't like Beastmaster and getting actually significant experience. Look, I could talk about all the changes that Final Fantasy XI has undergone, small and large, for days. I'm forgetting countless. I've probably forgotten more than like ever exist. I don't know. What I'm saying is Final Fantasy XI has undergone pretty drastic shifts throughout its life cycle, long before we ever got to the Abyssia level cap raise that I think truly signified like the end of an era. Some would say it's Wings of the Goddess, some would say it's Undergone, some would say it's Chains of Prometheus, but nobody can deny that once you raise the level cap from 75 to 80, everything changed. I was shocked to find out that level sync, though, for instance, wasn't introduced until 2008. I mean, that was a feature that I considered kind of core to my gameplay. It changed how I approached Final Fantasy XI, and I thought in a good way, because it allowed me to play with friends that were nowhere near my level range, higher or lower, and we could sing and party together even if we were nowhere near the same, playtime schedule, the same level range. We could actually just like play together that one day. And, missions, our gear would suddenly sink down, so I didn't have to have level 30 gear to do a level 30 mission, etc. Like, it just made things more convenient. Now, I have heard that a lot of people thought that kind of killed Final Fantasy XI. It killed the feeling of progression. It killed that, like, really core understanding of, when I'm level 40, I've got to level through the 40 areas. I can't skip it if I want by, like, sinking down to a level 30 area. And I get that. But it was such a cool thing, and it really allowed me to experience Final Fantasy XI. I thought a little more like relaxed. But like I said, many considered that to be long after the golden age of what made 11 special had long since ended. So the questions begin. Some consider the introduction of Dancer and Scholar to have changed, how the solo resource management of players, could be done, like through TP and kind of like that self-refresh of sublimation, and made soloing so much easier on basically every job, no matter what you were. And it kind of changed low manning, and people no longer necessarily needed 2 or 3 people to do some various content. They could do it by themselves, and it kind of just drove people always question, did this drive people away from group content or bring it together? And I don't know. That's a good question. Others would argue that undergone broke Final Fantasy XI with merit burns kind of replacing that skill chain magic burst experience, and people just wanted to do weapon skills as fast as you could, and black mages were delegated to black mage only burns and stuff, which I kind of brought up earlier. I mean, that's a good question. Like, did that make Final Fantasy XI better, or did it kind of take stuff away from Final Fantasy XI? And that's a question that only you can answer for yourself. And then if you go back to before that, the Chains of Prometheus era, like, if you're just looking at endgame leveling, did that have a good enough endgame leveling experience with people fighting like birds out in what was it, Lufay's Meadows, the giant cockatrice, and you had people partying in Bibiki Bay, but it was like 5K an hour. Like, that was like the 5K an hour era, and it was considered like a really decent party. Maybe you'd get like 10K an hour if you had that perfect party with insanely geared people, a bar, and everyone's just running around sky killing weapons. I don't know. I got like one of those parties, King Ramper's tomb parties. But I kind of started thinking about this because WoW Classic is on the way, and a lot of people were talking about various starts of the different expansions of World of Warcraft, but it wasn't quite as hard of a question for World of Warcraft. It was more about like, what patch are we staying is WoW Classic? Because even with Burning Crusade, the first expansion, it drastically changed how World of Warcraft existed. I think there was level cap raised, but more importantly, it dragged a lot of the endgame players off to a whole new continent that existed elsewhere and out of the general World of Warcraft game. And a lot of people just consider that to be the breaking point. Like, the game changed forever, and whether or not it was a good thing is up to you, but it did change. But I mean, with Final Fantasy XI, yes, there were tons of changes. We've discussed this. But up until, I would say, even Abyssia and the level 80 cap raise, nothing changed drastically at like a core level. Even through Wings of the Goddess, people were still partying to level. You still had that core game. Yes, Wings of the Goddess changed a lot, and all the expansions that came before it did as well. But the cap was still level 75. The Scorpion Harness was still good. The Habergeon was still amazing. The core game was still pretty much the same, and then Abyssia raised that level cap. World of Warcraft, right after the first expansion, everything was changed. So you don't really have that like long period of everything was the same. But I find this question so fascinating because all players have a different time when they were most connected to the game. Many haven't even experienced other eras, whether or not you hopped in later or earlier, and you were passionate about it for a while and then you stopped, or maybe something happened, like a change came about that totally ruined the game for you and you stopped playing, and you didn't see the next change that kind of made it better, or who knows? I mean, some stopped long before level sync was even a thing. They've never actually played the game with level sync, so it sounds so foreign to them. Others quit during the Chains of Prometheus release, before the difficulty was adjusted. It came out, everyone was so excited, and then it was like next to impossible. It was super frustrating, and a lot of people were just like, I'm done. I don't want to deal with this kind of stuff. Final Fantasy XI is too hard. It's ridiculous. And I kind of get it. It took a ton of time, and the content was ridiculous before they kind of started tweaking things a little bit. It's just such a personal question in terms of what time for you was the most special time. And sometimes that has nothing to do with the game itself, but who you were playing with. And, you know, maybe you started during Zillart, but none of your friends got involved in the game, or you didn't meet that in-game community that you really gelled with until Chains of Prometheus. So maybe the Zillart era was more fun for you, but it doesn't feel that way because you were kind of playing more alone and you didn't have that community or something. It really comes down to your experience, what gameplay models, what features are most important to you. But in an official release, if Square Enix came out tomorrow and said, we're making a Final Fantasy XI Classic, there's only one answer. They're gonna only provide one answer. And how do you find that one that gives the best, truest experience that will make the most people happy? And I don't know. I truly don't know what Square Enix would pick, but let's get to what I would pick. This is a really tough question for me. I always kind of thought it would be easy. And whenever somebody asks, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a pretty easy question. But it's not. For instance, like, I think I had the most fun playing Final Fantasy XI during the undergone era, but that had to do with a lot of things. Like myself and a lot of friends were in our Final Fantasy XI stride. We had a lot of 75 jobs, so we could do a lot of cool content throughout varying levels of the game. You know, we were playing regularly, so my friends were always on. It was just like a cool time for me in Final Fantasy XI. And, you know, as annoying as it is, things like merit burns made the game more approachable in various ways. But I'm not sure, like, it's my favorite period of the game. I didn't love burn parties. I just talked about this. I missed magic bursts and skill chains. I was so sad when they got introduced. It was a player-made choice, but when merit burns kind of killed standard partying mechanics, I was like, are they ever coming back? Like, it really made me kind of sad. Black mages were in their own little black mage burn party. I hated Calibri and imps. I hated fighting those enemies, and that's like all you fight throughout the entirety of the undergone leveling experience. I just didn't like a lot of what undergone did to the game, but it still was the period of the game that I was enjoying the most, if that makes sense. And I mean, some of the jobs that were introduced, Blue, Puppet Master, Corsair, are some of the coolest jobs in the game, and two of those are like my favorite jobs that I've ever leveled. But if we want to talk about definitely what I could not live without, I don't think I could go back before Chains of Promethea. If you want to argue about whether or not you do Chains of Promethea in its most difficult form after they tweak some of the mob positioning in the zones, or once they tweak some of the harder mission levels, like, fine, we can have that discussion. But I love Chains of Promethea. I think that Chains of Promethea really nailed what made Final Fantasy XI so special. It had these ramping difficulty of missions that started at a low level and end at 75. You get some amazing rewards that last throughout the game, and to this day are still some of the best gear you can get. Like the Rajas ring is just fantastic. The end game with C and Limbus, I thought was super cool, and the way that they approached it, where you could do it a couple times a week, I really liked. So if Square Enix came out and they said, we're making a Zillart era classic server, yeah, I'd be excited, and I would definitely check it out and play it, but I would be sad to miss all the Chains of Promethea brought to the game. Some of those zones, oh my gosh, the zones are amazing. I think when I think of like my youngest Final Fantasy XI days, I think of when Chains of Promethea was in its infancy. That's when I was playing the game. Undergone, I had hit my stride, and I really enjoyed the expansion and that period of playtime, but the Chains of Promethea era was what I think about as like classic Final Fantasy XI. But what about features that weren't part of the era? Like level sync didn't come till way later, but I would be kind of bummed personally if level sync wasn't a part of classic Final Fantasy XI as it was officially released. I mean, it was such a convenience thing that changed how you could play the game. Inventory management, I mean, most private servers offer you the not the Mog satchels, the ones that you can like equip gear from, and it kind of changes how you can approach the game. Like you can actually have multiple gear sets on you for other jobs and not have to change it in and out of the Mog house every time, which basically allows me to enjoy the game without it just being constantly inventory management. But I mean, that wasn't introduced till like long after Abyssia. I mean, that was like Adelan stuff. Home point teleports, book teleports, the books themselves for XP and just like little benefits when you're exploring the world. I would be kind of upset if they introduced the teleports. I think you know, having that importance of travel is one of the things that made Final Fantasy 11 classically so special. A lot of people, though, would say that they can't play the game without them. The amount of time it takes to get places is just too much. The investment is too high. So you're going to get different answers there. But I would like them to leave it out. I do kind of love the books, though. I love low manning stuff. I love playing with like 2 or 3 players. I always said that as much as I loved the group mechanics, I wish there was more scaling of like, okay, maybe I can't play super fast solo, or maybe Beastmaster truly is the only job that can solo for XP well, if you're not talking about like goblin pests and stuff. But if I had like 2 or 3 people, I would like that to ramp to a standard party experience a little bit better. I'd like that curve to be a little more natural. So, you know, if I have 4 people instead of 6, maybe we can have a decent party there. Like instead of only having either 6 or like 2 Beastmasters. Like there was only ever the perfect setups, and I would have loved to see more gradual. But again, that's a wish I've always had for Final Fantasy 11. I think the books kind of introduced that. They allowed you with 2 or 3 people to get significant experience gains over just playing by yourself, but not crazy enough that it beat a full party. But they were introduced far later. I would hope that they would do pre-Wings of the Goddess. I think the jobs that were introduced, campaign in general, the fact that the whole world was split into like this past and present, I didn't like what Wings of the Goddess did overall to Final Fantasy 11. I enjoyed the expansion for what it brought, but I think overall, if you were picking a classic experience, I would definitely have to say pre-Wings of the Goddess. You could make an argument for undergone in my mind, but definitely pre-Wings of the Goddess. And I think that's around when level sync was introduced, either right before or right after Wings of the Goddess came out was level sync. And I could live without it, I guess, but I would miss it. I'd miss it a lot. But I want to hear your thoughts. What do you consider to be the perfect era of classic Final Fantasy XI? And what features do you think were the start of the shift in 11's style? Was it big changes like undergone and players' choice to be more merit burn focused and get away from skill chains and magic bursts with things like Calibri and Imp kind of like silencing and reflecting magic all the time? Or was it a smaller shift? Was it a minute change somewhere that made, you know, Sub Ninja different? And I don't know. I just love to hear your thoughts. Like, man, I remember coming back during like, I don't know, I think it was one of the post-Abyssia expansions, and we were like 3-manning books in what was it? In the Boyana tree, and we were getting like 20k an hour. I was like, guys, this is amazing. And they kept saying to me, it was Hayden and Epic, and they're like, I think Abyssia might be a lot faster. And I was like, what? No, we found a secret here. This is amazing. We're getting 20k an hour. Of course, Abyssia at the time was like 60k an hour doing link shell burns or whatever, but I don't know. I always kind of hate that. Anyways, I want to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. As always, if you're new here, consider subscribing and like the video if you like having discussions like this. But otherwise, I will see you guys all in the next one. Peace. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in more videos like this, think about subscribing. And if you already have, don't forget to click that little bell next to the sub button to get notified when new videos go live. Hit me up in the comments with your thoughts on this video, or come hang out and chat with me on Twitch every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And definitely look me up on Twitter or Instagram and Hunt for Games to keep up with what else I've got going on. See ya.